They said it couldn't be done, but we made it to issue 25 on the Steve and Cimino Says Boom show, hosted by the Pop XP. Ooh, give it to me, Stevie.
Boom!
Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom show on the Pop XP. Now, guys, we're at issue 25, and we've been going deeper and deeper and deeper into comic book history, and it just does not stop. I don't know why, but Niall, why don't you tell people what they need, and then we can get into something that, we all want to get into. Go ahead, Niall. Go ahead.
Well, first off, we know they need to click that subscribe button and smash that bell to get notifications so they know when we go live and we upload awesome new episodes like tonight's episode. And man, I gotta say, the guest you got in tonight, John, it's like a national treasure. It makes me feel like a titan, you know. I'm not quite a teen anymore, but I'm definitely feeling like a titan tonight, and I'm really excited to have this guest back on the channel because this is the second time he's been on this channel, man. I'm excited.
Wow. And you know what, Steve? You're always doing your little grading and you're doing your little soliloquy videos and all that stuff. But Steve, and I hear all Steve's, he loves this and his music and his spandex and all that crazy stuff. But Steve, what do we got going on today that makes all that stuff passé, because the real deal stuff is right here on the Pop XP? Where are you, Billy Tucci?
Yeah, I have to admit, for me, there's certain names out there that they just leave me shattered, and there's, I'm sort of, always in shock, and we are very fortunate. I am personally honored because you guys have heard me mention a certain group of characters, including Nova, 1,000,000 times. Okay, and we, there's many more things going to be going on, but the fact that we have the great Marv Wolfman on our show today, woo! I have tissues here for the slathering to wipe, and I hope and pray. The last time I spoke to Marv Wolfman, it was very embarrassing. We'll get into that, but yes, Marv Wolfman, boom!
Oh. Oh, look who's here, Mr. Marv Wolfman. Woo!
You guys are so quiet and sedated. Gotta goose it up a little bit,
Well, Marv,
Especially,
we get excited when we get the legend. We get Murder's Row. We just had Chris Claremont. We got you. We get Jerry Kong. We get the best of the best. And how can we be like, how can't that Power Cosmic be on 10? Because listen, in the 60s, you had Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. In the 70s, you had Roy Thomas and John Buscema. In the 80s, you had Chris Claremont and John Byrne. And right next to them was the guy right down below, Marv Wolfman, George Perez. Ooh, baby. Now, the best of the best. We can't help. Steve, tell me something. I can't. I don't want even Marv to talk because I just want to keep telling him how good he is. Tell him.
Well, I have been a Marv Wolfman booster for a long time, and it's, during my job or whatever it is, people are always saying, oh God, here he goes again, and I'm like, no, this is Marv Wolfman, blah, blah, blah. And I have to explain to people, But yes, I am a huge booster of Marv Wolfman because, of course, one of my number one cosmic characters of all time is Nova. And I was a fan of Nova before anyone else was, before, you know. And the funny thing is, Marv, many, many years ago, I think it was 1994, you did a signing with George Perez at Continental Comics in LA. And I annoyed the hell out of you because it was supposed to be
forgiven you for it.
It was supposed to be a new Teen Titans theme, and I wasn't reading Teen Titans. I kept asking him about Nova and and about Fantastic Four, and and he was just. And I remember after a while, you were just like, you gave me this look of utter resignation, like, please, can you just, oh my God, get away from me. So I know that, luckily enough, you don't remember that, but I will apologize for that now.
The slate is clean. Marv, before we go into this, you have so many co-creations. I mean, it's crazy. Niall, let's just start throwing up. I sent you a few. And Marv, before we go into this, can you just say a few words about each character that Niall's going to just throw up there, and just a few things that what you think about them? Number one, right there. This guy. Who's that guy?
I don't quite recognize him. No, the thing I'll say about this particular picture is I hated the color scheme on the jacket, which is why on the inside you'll see him in a dark brown leather jacket. I always hated that green. I never understood, but really good character. Really liked him a lot. He's one of the two characters that came to me in literally 1 second, and I'm not joking. It's him and Deathstroke walking down the street. The character just came full blown to me at once. And those are the only two characters who did that. So
wow,
that's more than one sentence, but I gave it away.
We'll pop that one up then.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
There you go.
Okay, there's the other one. Now throw another one up there. Oh, Steve, get the napkins. Steve. Get the napkins, Steve.
That's for Steve.
That's for Steve.
I felt that I was working on Tomb of Dracula at the time, and I was doing all these slightly older skewing books, and I thought that we were starting to forget some of the younger readers as well. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do was, while I was writing Tomb of Dracula, which was probably skewed the oldest book at Marvel, I wanted to do something for the youngest crowd. And Nova was intended. That's why it has such wonky, crazy villains and endless parade of villains and all this family stuff, and everything was there in order to get kids to be excited by the comics again.
Wow. Now throw him another one. Ooh, look at this guy.
One of my favorites.
Like Bullseye, wanted to come up with a character who could fight Daredevil from a distance. Because if he's close up, his radar sense will get him. But if a playing card is coming at you, his radar sense isn't going to pick that up as a threat.
Oh,
so he could be a half a mile away, and do something to Daredevil.
Wow.
Now was that something working on Daredevil that just instinctively came up when it came to character development?
Say that again.
Now, from working on Daredevil to create a character like a Bullseye, was that something that instinctively during character development, you're like, I have to develop this?
My thought was, as I say, I wanted a character that Daredevil couldn't necessarily pick up or have a fist fight with, which is the standard. You always try to come up with a twist, something that they haven't seen. And I thought the idea of a character who could do things from a little bit of a distance. They could throw a pencil and it becomes a weapon, things that wouldn't normally pick up. So that made sense, and it was a different approach to how to handle a villain for Daredevil, for me at least.
Yeah, wow. I love it. Loved it. Let's throw one more up.
Ooh.
Black Cat.
Black Cat, loved the character. I originally created her for Spider-Woman, not Spider-Man. And I was developing it for Spider-Woman, and I decided to leave the book for a number of reasons. And when they asked me to take over Spider-Man, and I decided to bring the Black Cat with me to Spider-Man.
Wow.
You can see the original design cover in the letter column in that issue. We showed first the Dave Coughlin's design for Black Cat, but also the Spider-Woman cover that would have been had I completed the story and put it there instead of in Spider-Man. Did make some changes because Spider-Woman fought a different type of character than Spider-Man would. And when you put it in Spider-Man, you needed a little bit more hands-on action.
Wow. Wow, that's so cool. I mean, so many characters. And Marv, I have to say, you're looking like a little bit like Deathstroke now. You look. I swear to God, you could be a stuntman.
I wish I felt that way.
Okay, Marv, we like to start this off by what was the comic book, or what was the moment that got you into wanting to be a comic book writer, or wanting to get into this field? What is the story behind Marv Wolfman and how he became an editor-in-chief? Oh my gosh.
Well, that's like 22 different questions, so we'll take one. I was a kid, and I was at a friend's house, and we were watching a TV show called Howdy Doody.
Hey kids, what time is it?
Which was a very famous kid show at the time.
Yeah.
At the end of the show, we normally would get up to change the channel. This is before remotes, before anyone had a remote. So you had to physically get up and change the channel to a different show, which is what we intended, but we didn't get up in time. And the next show right after Howdy Doody was The Adventures of Superman.
Wow, yeah.
At least in New York. At the end of the show, it said something to the effect of Superman is based on the copyrighted character appearing in Superman and Action Comics Monthly.
Superman is based on the original character appearing in Superman magazine.
And my friend and I got up. We walked to the corner where there was a newsstand. We were only like 7 years old, 6 years old, maybe less. But we walked to the corner and didn't have to cross any streets and bought our first comics. And and we bought Superman because of that.
Wow.
How we knew that Superman was a comic, I don't remember. But we certainly got up in response to having seen the show and became a lifelong Superman fan and comics fan.
Wow. That's great. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
What year was that? Was that like 1956, 57?
That seems a little bit too old. I'd go even younger, earlier. It's really hard. It's 70 years ago.
Okay. So, continuing on with the theme of firsts. So let's say you've been reading comics, you've got to a point where, you're getting pretty savvy. But at some point, a thought must have popped into your head. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can actually write. What did you do, and how did you actually break into the industry?
Okay, that's only 40 questions. What had happened was I always used to make up stories of my own. The Superman show promoted my storytelling. It got me involved, and I'd come up with my own Superman stories. And then I'd come up, just before going to bed, I'd come up with all these story things. Move ahead in time till about age 13, 14, someplace around there. And I had a letter published in Mystery and Space Comics. I wrote a fan letter. I was a huge Adam Strange fan, and wrote a fan letter, and Julie Schwartz published it. Julie tended to print the addresses of the people who wrote. The idea was, in his mind, was to get the fans together, because he came out of science fiction fandom. So for him, this was a logical thing. He was a science fiction fan, and people got together on that. He would make it possible. So a week or two later, I got in the mail 2 fanzines that were mailed to me. One was something called Rocket Blast, and the other was The Comic Reader, the second editor of which is Roy Thomas. At any rate, I got the two fanzines, and that brought me into fandom. And I started to see that in fandom, there were fanzines at the time of people writing and drawing their own stories. And I said, I could do that. I was an art major later in school, so I was always interested in art. And I was always making up stories, so I figured I could handle that. Years later, I was publishing fanzines, and I would always send them to the editors. Unlike today, where there's 600 editors at each company, back then it was DC and Marvel, period. Since I wasn't interested in writing for Archie at the time, though I read it. At any rate, I sent the fanzines, and one of my fanzines was a horror fanzine called Stories of Suspense. There was a superhero fanzine called Super Adventures, and there was a humor fanzine. But I had sent Stories of Suspense to Joe Orlando, who was an editor at DC, and it featured little short horror stories that I wrote, and occasionally other people wrote as well. And Joe liked it and called me and asked if I'd be interested in submitting some story ideas to them. Back then, the older writers were starting to retire, and I think they were looking for new talent and new people to bring in new ideas and such. It worked out.
Wow. Now, Marv, did you ever go visit the offices at that time when you were young? Because I know a lot of guys used to go visit, like Marvel or visit DC. Did you ever visit any of the offices?
You couldn't visit Marvel because you couldn't get inside past the lobby. But DC had a regular tour, originally twice a week, and then just once a week on a Thursday, I believe it was. And at this point, I was going to school at the High School of Art and Design in Manhattan. So my high school was 6 blocks away from DC.
Wow.
So I would take that tour constantly. And I got to know all the artists, and I got, Murphy Anderson and Carmine Infantino worked there. They were the only 2 artists who actually did work there. And I got to know all the editors, and I worked, because I was an art major in school, and a lot of those guys went to High School of Art and Design when they were younger, when it was called the High School of Industrial Arts. Same school, though. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
No, did you ever go and visit the show? Did you go and visit the offices and all that stuff? Show them your work and stuff?
Constantly, as I said, I visited it not every week, but most times. If I could get out of school a half hour early, I'd be there in time for the tour. But I wasn't always capable of getting to it in time. So I was up there often, and because I was an art major, at summertime, I became an intern at DC, and I worked on color separations and paste ups and mechanicals and all that sort of stuff. So I was up there quite a bit.
Wow, there it is. There's the end. There is the end. Wow. Go ahead, Steve.
So, Marv, I used to work for an old dealer. His name was Dave Belmont. And he told me a story. And he said basically he met very young Marv Wolfman and Len Wein at a convention. And he said, well, what are you guys gonna do? And both of you apparently in unison said, we're going to be comic writers. It was one of his favorite stories. He told me that story every month because he kept forgetting that he had told me. So which brings up another point. Obviously, you and Len Wein, basically, synonymous with the same era coming in, and friends for a long time. When did you first meet Len Wein?
Yeah.
He lived very close to my sister. in Levittown, and as I said, I had a letter published in comics, and his friend, someone named Ron Fradkin, got in touch with people who lived not far from them. I mean, we were both he was on the island, I was in Queens at the time, which is not that close, but close enough. And I happened to be visiting my sister the next day, and who lived in Levittown. So they rode their bikes over, and that's how we met.
Wow. And Marv, I remember there was a story that you guys told in the Jack Kirby documentary. You and Len went to go visit Jack, and you actually saw him draw a page. I forget the page that you guys saw, but did you go see Jack a lot, or tell me about some of the...
Yeah, we visited Jack a bunch of times, a lot of times, and he was pretty incredible. My memory tells me, and my memory has been saying this for a long time, so it's not something just recent. I'm pretty sure that what we saw was was a page from the Galactus trilogy, from the early Fantastic Four. That's the memory I have, because obviously it was months later that the thing came out, and so we didn't recognize it then, but then I remembered it later on. So I'm pretty sure it was the Galactus trilogy. But Jack and his wife, Roz, were incredibly friendly. They invited you into the home, and Roz would make sure you had a sandwich. And Jack would just talk and draw the whole time, never stop drawing. What was amazing to me as an art major was that Jack didn't do any outlining. He drew finished right on the page.
Wow.
He didn't do a quick sketch. He didn't do any preliminary work. He just saw it, and it was like he was projecting the image onto the paper and he was copying it over. He was capable of seeing everything in his head and translating it directly to the page. Now, Jack, you can't see it, but over there on my wall is a giant picture of Thor that Jack drew for me back then, from 1967, I think.
Incredible.
Wow. Wait, Marv, I got to tell you something. It's pretty interesting in how synergy works. Do you know when he started working for Marvel in 1965, one of the first things he saw was the pages of those Fantastic Four issues coming in, and he could remember seeing the Silver Surfer for the first time. This is nuts that you guys actually saw Jack drawing that. Oh my God, that's crazy!
That's a great capper.
Oh!
For that story, and I will have to remember that.
Oh my God, that is nuts. Now, you got something to say to the king over here? Wow.
I mean, that I never knew that about Kirby. That's incredible that he just projected it, just put it right on paper. That is so neat, and to have that memory is just awesome.
If you pick up the Jack Kirby Collector, the magazine that Tomorrow's publishes, they publish an awful lot of his pencils, and you can see how tight those pencils are. And that's with no underdrawing in it. Now, I can't say that he did that on every single page, but every time we visited him, he would just be drawing it because he just never stopped drawing.
Now, when you went to art school, it was the intention to be a comic book artist?
Yeah.
And what made you gravitate then from wanting to be an artist to now being one of the most prolific comic book writers there ever have been?
I would write stories for me to draw. And as time went by, I realized that my art was not up to my writing. I could not make the art do what I wanted, whereas I can make the words do what I wanted. And it was much more pleasurable to come up with the ideas than try to illustrate them with power. Comic book artists were never given that much credit, but they have one of the hardest jobs of any artist, because most artists, if they're in advertising or something else like that, do one picture. They'll spend forever on this one picture and design it beautifully and everything. They've got to do 5, 6, 7 panels on a page. And then they have to do 22 pages. They have to do perfect drawings on all that stuff. And I would have been a C-level artist as opposed to whatever I am as a writer.
Wow, that's crazy. Go ahead, Steve.
Wow. We basically only just started, but we've already learned, basically 2 little nuggets here. The Jack Kirby revelation is astonishing, and it reminds me of a scene from Amadeus when Salieri is saying, "Oh wow, he was reading the words as if and there was no corrections." I don't know if you guys have seen Amadeus. I've seen it 10,000 times.
But they showed no corrections of any kind. Not one.
That reminded me of that part. But I think when it comes to your writing, what you've just said now, it's like it explains everything to me because you had an understanding as an artist, the way you're writing, it's 1 and 2. It's not like you were just someone that was, used to write textbooks and coming over to comics and saying, okay, the character's going to go. You could visually see it in your mind and you're writing it that way. And so another artist comes along and goes, I see what he's doing. I see where he's going. And I think that's what the synergy is.
I've always seen it. I've always seen my scripts visually first. I know what the story is, but I see them visually and I work them around the visuals so that comics is a graphic medium. The first thing a reader sees is the visual. The visuals are going to bring them into the book. The writing hopefully will have them continue to come back. But it is a visual medium, and the writer who doesn't understand how it's going to look is going to screw it up horribly. They're not going to give the artist visuals that could be drawn or visuals that don't work to tell the story. There's 100 different things. If you have an art background, by the way, I was an art teacher in junior high school. I taught, not when I was in junior high school as an adult. I have my degree was Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I taught junior high school art. So I can't draw it well, but I know the rules. I know how the visuals should be. And most of the artists that I've worked with at one point or another really appreciate that, because I never have them do anything that physically cannot be done, even if it's a difficult picture for them to draw. Everything, they can see the visual right away. So they have to push a little bit maybe to get it to be correct, but they see the visual, they know what I'm going for, and they appreciate that because I'm not asking for armies of 10,000 people, or any of that stuff. And trust me, a lot of people do.
Wow. Okay, so Marv, eventually you start working for Marvel. And working for Marvel, like, were you hired by Roy? Was it Roy that hired you?
Well, Roy was at Roy was at Marvel, but that's not where I started. I started at DC. I was doing mystery stories. I was doing all of that. Then when DC had their implosion, and I was the assistant editor for Joe Kubert too. At that point, I went over to Warren magazines, and because Warren hired me, and to edit Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella. A little bit later, Roy, who knew that Marvel was going to start doing a series of black and white magazines, and I knew Roy from the parties, and we all lived real close to each other back then. People were in New York at the time. And he asked me about coming over to handle the black and white magazines at Marvel. I said no, because I had just started at Warren, and I didn't think it was fair to leave a job so fast. 6 or 8 months later, Roy asked me again.
Wow.
And at this point, I was ready to go, because working at Warren wasn't the easiest thing in the world.
Wow. So it's so great. And so you start working at Marvel. Obviously around 74-ish. Yeah, 74-ish. Roy starts moving out. Then Len takes his place with as editor in chief or editor at that time. And then you kind of come in there, right? Are you the next one?
The next one. I was the editor in chief, or whatever you want to call it, of the black and white magazines at Marvel. Most of them, except for that Roy was editing. Savage Sword of Conan and the science fiction one, whose name I can't think of at the moment. So when Len left, I was being the next editor there because I was handling an entire line of books as well. I moved over to the color line.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Steve.
So, if I'm trying to extrapolate how you could possibly feel as a writer with all this knowledge and all this imagination pouring in your head, I think the last thing you probably wanted to do was spend time, dealing with, logistics about the magazine and, someone calling up about the printer problems. So is that why you decided to give that up and then just go full steam into your writing?
Eventually, I enjoyed it because my job in the beginning was creative. I was working with the writers. I was working with everything, and I enjoyed putting together the puzzles of how to create the magazines and all of that. I really did enjoy that. But then Marvel was taken over by a new company, and my job became far more business. It was writers' rates and everything, and I just had no interest in that whatsoever. And I made a deal with Marvel, as Roy had done previously, to write and edit my own books.
Yeah, there was a few of you guys, those writer editors going on there, and then eventually, what was your reasoning to leave Marvel? Was that when Jim Shooter stepped in, or was it happening before that? Were you thinking of that before?
It's when he stepped in.
Yeah,
could not work with him.
Yeah, well, I know because he was the guy that put a stop to all those writer editors that Len was, that Roy was, and you were, and I think Jerry was, and then you went. So you go over to DC. When do you? Obviously, you knew George Perez at Marvel, right? Is that when you first were introduced to George at Marvel?
We did a Fantastic Four annual together, and we did a couple of other stories together.
Yeah, and so did he go to DC first, or were you at DC first?
I was already at DC, and what happened was, when I came to DC, I said, "Here's the books I'm really interested in. Here, what I don't want is team-up books. I had been writing at Marvel 2-in-1, and what's the other team-up book they had?
Marvel Team Up?
Huh?
Marvel Team Up?
Yeah, Marvel Team Up and Marvel 2-in-1 primarily, and I really don't enjoy those type of books. To me, they're fake in that you have to come up with some gimmick to get these characters together, and it has to make, it's too many concerns that have nothing to do with the actual story. So I said, please don't put me on any of those. And so they must have not heard the word "don't," because I was assigned both Brave and Bold and to the team-up books at the time. And so I had to get off it as fast as I possibly could. I really didn't want to work on those. And I lobbied and got Superman and Green Lantern, which are my two favorite characters at DC by far. And other people really love to do those team-up books. As I say, I just didn't. So I was really happy to get off them and do the books I really, really wanted to do because they are my favorites.
And then all of a sudden, through all that, Niall, can you show this beautiful issue of #1 of what I'm talking about? I'm sure you know. This comes into the fold. Now, can you tell us the story of you and George, how this came into being?
Well, what happened was, as I said, I was coming up with titles to take over or to do that did not have team-ups. This is not a team-up book, as far as I'm concerned. Those are group books. That the characters are going to be together all the time, so it makes sense that they're together. It's a very different type of thing than having to come up, well, why is the thing with Galactus this month? Or something of that sort, which is ridiculous, and you have to come up with an excuse, you have to make it work. So back in the 1960s, I did a couple of issues of the original Teen Titans, one with Len, the rest by myself.
Remember that.
And so I liked the group as a concept. I didn't particularly like the comic, but I like the concept of the Teen Titans. And I said, I would like to recreate the Teen Titans. They were not hot for that at all, because the last version of the Teen Titans had been canceled only a few months earlier, and it didn't sell. And we basically came in and said, this is before George was involved, we'll do it better. And because they really liked my Tomb of Dracula and my Spider-Mans, part of the reason that they wanted me to come over to DC, they looked at the overview that I came up with and really liked it. Meanwhile, I had to go up to Marvel for something. I was up there and I saw George in the hallway, and I said, I'm over at DC, starting a new book, Teen Titans. Would you be interested? And he said, I'm really interested in the Justice League. But I would love to do that, and maybe then I could, once they see what I can do, they may give me the Justice League. So we brought George in, and at that point it all made sense, and DC let us do the first issue of the Teen Titans. We fully expected it would be canceled. If you know the DC books at the time, this is 1980, most of the DC new titles were canceled within 6 months. Mm-hmm. You had 6 issues and they were gone, and most of the fans were buying Marvel books only, and only a small number were buying DC books. So we fully expected it was going to be canceled within 6 issues, but why don't we do exactly the superhero book we always wanted to do? Mm-hmm. Do 100%, they're going to let us do it, because they're not going to bother with it. It's I'm sure they think it's going to be dead too within a few months, but they published it and didn't die in 6 months.
No, it didn't. Oh my! Go ahead, Steve. Wow.
So again, it's just amazing to me, because you're right. At that time, over at DC, 1979, 1980, you were basically looking at a wasteland of just awful books, awful. And DC needed an injection of fire. Okay, Marvel were ripping. I mean, they had Frank Miller over there on Daredevil. You had Claremont and Byrne on X-Men. DC needed something.
Yeah.
They needed something, okay? And the gods were smiling, because many, many people, when I speak to fellow people of my age who were reading comics back then, they would read X-Men and Teen Titans. And that was it. Okay, and to them it was like they're the 2 books. They're the only books that I want to read. The only way that the modern 1980s book is the Teen Titans or the X-Men. That was it. You couldn't break them out of it. And that is an amazing compliment to both of you, of course, Marv and George. But the fact that in your writing style, you could have these fantastic concepts 1 second, but then these deeply emotional panels and stories where everyone could relate to it, because it was pure realism. And it was that switch that showed you the difference between a 1980s book and a 1970s book. Although in your Tomb of Dracula, you were definitely getting into that area. But that's what I explained to people. And is that something that was a conscious effort on your part?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I approached Titans the same way I approached Dracula. First of all, I plotted far in advance, so I knew what was going to happen for the next 2 to 3 years with the character, not the individual plots, but the character stories, which to me are far more important. I also felt that the readership was getting older. When we started, when I started comics, the readership was 8 to 14, 8 to 15, 16, something like that. My feeling was we were now starting to graduate high school. We're getting older, and that means I could write stories for an older audience. It means I didn't have to do the silly stuff. Lois Lane spends every single issue trying to find out who Superman is. I have no interest in stories or anything of that sort. I want to do, these are kids between 16 and 19, and they need to be concerned about things that age group would be concerned. Each age group would be concerned. I was not going to be writing for the youngest audience, like Nova. It was very much intended to be an older book, not maybe Dracula old, because that was gruesome and it had to be done very carefully, but character-wise older, where everyone acted their age and they could talk and they could be friends. And every single Teen Titan, and it's not a coincidence, has friends and family outside of the superhero business. Donna had her friends at the photography studio. She knew people that weren't all about superheroes all the time. Cyborg was Sarah Sims and the school for the handicapped kids. Every one of them, except for Raven, who was intentionally kept at a distance from everybody, every one of them had outside people that they knew and cared about. Or learn to care about. And that was really important to me and to George. And that's the way we focused. The Titans was very much a character book that was also a superhero book.
What Steve said to Chris Claremont in one of a few episodes behind this, that how he was able to capture the female reader. That is a big thing that you guys were able to do. You captured a lot of those female readers with those because you had these relationships. It was incredible, and I don't know any other two comics that actually got that fan base and made them so rabid over those issues. It's incredible.
Tomb of Dracula actually had a huge female audience. If you know, most women like horror stuff. They're very much into horror. They're very much into the dark, macabre type stories of that sort. So we had a huge female, and that's why the characters in Tomb of Dracula, Rachel was very carefully developed. She was not the perfect person that you'd see. She wasn't Betty or Veronica. She was a very troubled person. Her problems could be related or relatable. With Titans, what we did there, and in my original designs for Titans, was there are 3 women in that book. Mm-hmm. Most team-up books had 1. The women in the Titans are the most powerful characters in the Titans, by far. Right? There's no doubt about it. The female audience was always ignored, and they were a very strong and very vocal and very loyal audience. Now, I wasn't thinking about that when we were doing it. I'm thinking about that in retrospect, but it was very important to me to bring in women and to stop doing this one woman. I mean, the Fantastic Four, they had one woman, and what's her power? To turn invisible. Totally useless character. I wanted them to be the strongest characters in the book, and I wanted them to be characters that had real backstories in real life.
And it's funny. I saw it. I always found a lot of similarities in Starfire and Rogue, because there was a lot of sexual tension there. Like Rogue couldn't touch people, but in Starfire, to understand them, she kissed them.
Which one is Rogue? I was not an X-Men fan, so I really never read the book.
She came later, but it doesn't matter. But the thing is that it just was. It was just.
Is she the Kitty Pride?
No.
No, Rogue is the one. She has the white hair in the middle. Remember, she had the white hair.
No, because those characters I think came up after I left Marvel, and once I stopped getting the free comics, the comics sent to me, I just didn't read them, so I never saw any of that stuff.
Wow.
No, but there's a lot of similarities there in the sense of sexual tension, because Starfire, which was first, obviously, but I like what was the. I love how you had her kiss people to understand them, but that also like brought a little jealousy and a little tension there. That was genius. Tell me, what was the story behind that?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Didn't Starfire have to kiss another person to understand them or get their emotions?
Yeah, she kissed Dick Grayson. She kissed Robin.
Right, but isn't that a power? Isn't that a power she has now? Like, is that something?
That was, I have to admit, it was rather silly.
Okay.
And I knew it was silly then, but we had to solve the problem fast. And so if you address the problem, as silly as it is, there's now a reason. Yes, I can do that. And I picked up your language. Because I didn't want to spend the next 2 years just worrying about that. We only had in our mind 6 issues, so let's get right to it. Okay, she speaks alien language through osmosis. She picks up English. Fine, accept it. It's explained. It's not something you just did. You actually addressed it.
Oh, cool. Go ahead, Steve. Wow.
You know, I want to go back again to the period where you're writing Tomb of Dracula and Nova, because to me it's an amazing thing, and that your introduction to how you were writing Nova, slam bang, all these villains. And by the way, I will thank you forever for creating Diamond Head. Everyone who knows me is sick and tired of me. I'm the biggest Diamond Head fan in the world.
I forgot. Yes,
The dumbest
I really am.
in the world. I
love that character, Archdiker. I read the origin 5 million times, and the concept of him getting hit by a laser and then becoming a diamond, to me, it showcased an imagination. You were able to take me out there, and I was really enjoying it. And then, if I was in a serious mood, I could switch over to the heavy melodramatic grandeur of Tomb of Dracula. Yeah. But not only that, you could also have characters like Dr. Sun, which was just like a brain. And I can't explain the genius and the brilliance of it. I mean, come on, Dr. Sun.
The beauty of comics is that people will give you some freedom if you do it well. So the idea of a living sun, a living brain, I was fully aware that that didn't even quite fit into Dracula, but I knew it would work. And as I say, because Nova was aimed at the youngest audience, where they have unfettered imagination, they don't censor themselves at all. A silly idea like Diamond Head would be enjoyed. And what I was trying to do was get younger kids back into comics by enjoying them, not having these very tightly figured out, character stories that we love to write, and they're fun to do, and they're good to read for older readers. But I think younger readers want all these questions answered and all these fun things happening within a good story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly amazing. And by the way, you're the only writer that ever made me like reading about a teenager. I detest teenagers, and when I was a teenager, I detested other teenagers. However, I loved Richard Rider. I loved the fact that he was nowhere near perfect, and he wasn't, a pure, Spider-Man clones, idea. He wasn't filled with angst. He was out there having fun with his, with his costume, and he was making mistakes. And again, the sheer magnificence of all these incredibly colorful characters, and that's not even, the Sphinx, and the fact that you got to finish that story off in the Fantastic Four. Oh, and by the way, we didn't even mention the creation of Terax the Tamer.
Yeah.
Okay. There is so much more going on there. And then, of course, you managed to bring Dr. Sun into Nova, which to me was like, really? Is he going to really try and do that? That's incredible. I mean, again, when I talk to people and they're like, oh, Steve, why don't you read comics anymore? And I'm like, let me tell you about the golden days. Let me tell you about Dr. Sun and Dracula and all that stuff. And again, for me, it's a skill that you have, Marv, that I think in many ways has been lost. We have writers today that can write very earthy, deep stories, but they can't go outside of the box. They would never be able to think of the living brains of Xandar. They wouldn't be able to do that because their brains aren't. They're like, no, I don't think that would work. Whereas you could switch between something that was ultra realistic and then go all the way out there until in the end you're asking the reader to go, wow, is that possible? Is that possible? That's an art that's been lost, Marv.
Oh, thank you. Stan and Jack in Fantastic Four introduced endless characters, one after the other. And that was my favorite book at Marvel for a long time. And I loved the weird stuff that Stan would do on occasion. He would throw in the craziest concepts, and somehow between him and Jack could make it work. My view was that if that's the stuff I enjoyed, that's what I want to do as a writer. I want to throw as many new ideas as possible. You can't get that today unless the people own the book. People aren't going to be giving away characters the way we did. And I have no regret because I've had a 50-plus year career doing this stuff, and it's still going on. So, but I think it's a lot harder today to have writers willing to come up with one character after another. And then, of course, you have to have the ability to create the character.
Marv. Yeah, of course. I just to go back, before we get into Crisis on Infinite Earths, where it goes to, I'm in my daughter's room, and I usually do this here, and the two characters that she grew up with was Artemis from that Roy co-created with that was in Young Justice, and this is a toy that she has had in her room since she was a baby. This right here, and I just want to say thank you, because you brought a lot of happiness to my daughter, and that she had this forever, and she loved your character in Teen Titans. So from the bottom of my heart, my daughter means the world to me. You brought a lot of smiles and happiness to her face with this character, and I thank you for that, and I love you for that.
Was that the 2-pack with his sister?
No, I went all out. This was like this. This was like the Stars one. This is like this. I went the big money. This cost a couple $100. We go all out here in the Cimino household.
So Mark, you can't see it because of the way it is. Starfire. I have several Starfires on the wall in the bookcase, and of course there's Cyborg and there's Nightwing, and a whole bunch of other characters as well.
Do you have a favorite?
So Marv, this is for you right here.
Titans?
Somebody was saying something.
Yeah, I was just mentioning. Is there a character though that's near and dear to your heart when it comes to the Titans? One that maybe you liked to write more about than others?
I never answer that question because it's like asking a parent, "Who do you like the best? Which kid do you like?" So I let the fans argue back and forth about that, and I step out of it.
Great answer.
Wow. Okay, Marv, what about now after Teen Titans, you go into the Crisis on Infinite Earths? That was just a mega event. Tell us the story behind that. It has to be told.
Well, I have told it an awful lot, so I'll try to encapsulate it a little bit shorter.
Sure.
We got a letter. I was doing the letter column on Green Lantern, and one of the readers wrote saying the DC continuity was very complex and complicated, and they could no longer follow all of it. And what are you going to do about it? And in my answer, I says, "Good question. We'll have to do something one of these days." What happened was, of course, that got me to start thinking, and we were heading down to a convention. A whole bunch of us from DC were heading to we're heading to a convention in Pennsylvania, and I got to the train station very early. Far too early, and I was sitting there waiting for everyone else to show up, and came up with the whole story, or came up with all the concepts for the major thing of the story. And then as we were traveling on the train to Pennsylvania, I told the others the story, and they all liked it. And then the following Monday, I went into the office and pitched Dick Giordano, who really liked it, who immediately brought me into Jeanette Kahn, who was the publisher at the time, and she liked it. And the idea was, let's simplify the universe. Let's get all those Marvel fans who won't even look at a DC book to think about DC, to see how many great characters DC had. If you look at the story, you'll notice that Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are barely in the first few issues.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that was, my feeling was, if the Marvel fans who read comics did not like DC, it's probably because they don't like the Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, because those are the main characters.
Smart.
So, but what we did, if you look also at that first issue, first pages, we're on Earth 3, which is the villain Earth. And we have all the doppelgangers for the DC characters. We have Ultraman, we have Power Ring, or whatever else. And so in a sense, we're addressing the DC heroes, but they're all the villains, and they're wiped out, they're destroyed in four pages, showing how powerful the characters were. And then we didn't bring Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman in for several issues, because I wanted the readers to see how many great characters DC had that were not Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. They were not the company that you thought it was. You just haven't given it a try because you didn't like these. We slowly brought the characters in once they've already accepted the concept of Crisis. The creation of Crisis was not only trying to come up with a really good story and make it all work, but to make it such that the fans would see how good the characters of DC were, and not have this feeling, because the Marvel fans used to call themselves Marvel zombies, and you couldn't break through that at all. And so my intent was to find all these things that were subtle, like having the villains wiped out right away, because psychologically they know that's Superman, they know that's Wonder Woman, they know that. So the villain is more powerful than all the DC characters. And it was important to do that, and to bring in all the stuff of that sort, and to make it such that Marvel fans would really appreciate the book and like it on its own, and then lead them to try out some other DC books, which is why we had the crossovers, which most of the other comic fans, comic professional writers really hated that we were doing. But later, and you notice we don't have a lot of crossovers in the early issues, but once Crisis came out, they saw that the few books that did have the crossovers sold really well, because fans were giving DC a try. So then they all asked me to put their characters into the book, and we did as best we could. It would have been nice to have spread it out through all 12 issues, but you do what you do.
And Marv, it led about 20, 30 years later, Niall, put up the picture. You got your little appearance in this. Can you tell us about when you got your little cameo?
Supergirl, Flash. I just love it when you guys team up. Would you sign this for me, please? Okay.
In the CW? Was that Supergirl and Flash?
Yeah, Flash and Supergirl.
Yeah, it's I got
That's awesome.
they were the people at Mark Guggenheim and the others were really big fans of Crisis. They loved the book. To them, it was vitally important. See, I saw it as a sort of a nightmarish writing experiment, very, very difficult, and I had to keep absolute track on who each character was, which I knew, but I had to make sure the characters were all good. But primarily, it was a jigsaw puzzle, a million-piece jigsaw puzzle that had to work, but it was really hard. But when you're a fan, you're following all that stuff. And they called me at one point because we knew that they were going to do the Crisis. It was the previous season ended with Coming Crisis on Infinite Earth, and wow. And they asked if I would be interested in doing a cameo. I thought it was going to be. I'd be in the background. I had no idea that they were going to give me lines to read. I just read it. Their writers wrote it, and I was just an actor in it. I was really nervous. My memory is not that great, and I really could not remember all the lines. And they sent it to me 2 weeks early. It's only 3 or 4 lines. A little kid could do that, but my memory is gone. And for 3 weeks, I rehearsed that, and I never once got it right. I'd always mess up someplace. And when we did it finally, it's the one time I did it correctly. And when I got back to, because that was filmed in Vancouver, Canada. When I got back home, just for fun, I tried to do it again, and I couldn't do it again. So the one time it was necessary, I actually got it to work, and I was really thankful because it's a great memory. Those guys were really very sweet, very nice, and it was nice for them to, on a TV set, to take a photo with me. That's not always encouraged,
That was great. When I saw it, I was watching it, and I just started laughing. I was like, Marv! I was screaming. I felt so happy. I was like, there it is. That was great. All right, I know we got to wrap this up soon. So, Steve, you got some last things to say for Marv?
Yeah, I wanted to talk briefly about the impact of Crisis, because for me, and I'm not a DC fan, I never really read DC that much. However, I did buy the official indexes to the Crisis on Infinite Earths just because I was I was like, what, how, who, when? And it completely blew me away. And the way I explain it to people now, and I hope you understand this, Marv, what I'm going to say, the template for all modern epic crossover stories was created on Crisis on Infinite Earths, not Secret Wars, okay? Not Contest of Champions. Crisis, huge story, crossing over, huge crossover with everything, bringing everything neat and tidy, the largest cast of characters, planets, dimensions ever done, ever attempted, and everyone has tried to get close to it in all these years, and no one can match it because that was the original story. So much gravitas, so much work, so much skill that, and for me, not being a DC fan, without Crisis, you wouldn't have all these other major epics. And of course, Jim Shooter went off to try and do Secret Wars 2 and followed the exact same template, big story, crossing over and everything. But Secret Wars 2 to me was like, and I hate to say it, but it was like, okay, we're going to forget about that. So for me, whenever people say to me, Steve, what's the most impactful, the most impactful story in the whole of comic history? That's not Dark Knight. I'm sorry. It's not Watchmen. Okay? Sorry. It's Crisis on Infinite Earths. Marv,
Well,
I bow to the genius of that task and the fact that you managed to think of that story sitting down at a train station, then walk into an office and get all these huge corporate heads.
just the
amazing.
overall concept, including the fact that we'd have deaths, which everyone loved the idea, but everyone said you'll never get any approvals on that, and they did. The one that shocked me was Supergirl. I felt it was very important because if we were recreating everything from scratch, Superman should be the sole survivor of Krypton. If in the future you want to bring back a new Supergirl, you can create a brand new Supergirl. But right now we need to do that. And the problem was, so I felt that she had to go. The problem was that we also knew there was a movie coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't sure that they would say yes, but Jeanette understood the concept of having to worry about the comics, and that was her job, not the movies, and to make sure that to do everything possible to help change the image of DC. I was given carte blanche. I was the editor. I did run everything past the other editors and the other writers and all of that stuff. They always had a list saying what was happening next, month after month, and also where, if they wanted to do the crossovers. I have to say, although he's been very honest and admitted that he was never a fan of Crisis and didn't want to be involved with it, Roy was the one outside creator who helped the most.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
He was, even though he knew that he didn't like the whole idea of the thing, he had to do that, and he did it without complaint, whereas some of the other writers caused all sorts of grief and created all sorts of problems for it. So I've always been a big fan of Roy's as a creator, and as a person, since I knew him and we were friends. But he really showed he cared more for the books than himself. Now, the one place I will defend myself is I didn't kill any of those characters in the Justice Society. Roy never said this, but a lot of the other fans did. Roy understood what was going on, so he didn't have to. But I never killed a single one of those characters. They were all killed in, I think, All-Star or one of the other books. But I could not kill any character that was created before I was born. So
that's awesome.
The legend of Roy Thomas is scattered everywhere. Niall, got some last words for Mr. Marv Wolf?
Yeah, I mean, I know you guys, huge Marvel guys. Me, I'm a huge DC guy. And being engaged in comics late '80s, into the '90s and on. I mean, Marv's name was on everything I was reading. I mean, for me,
I was going to say the nice thing about Crisis that I had was I had time.
Mm-hmm.
That book is very dense. There's a million different things going on in the book, and everything pays off. You can't do that in 10 minutes. This was something that I kept building the outline. I keep adding things to the outline and take things out of it until it finally all worked and came together. And it took a long time to do that book. And I was never happy once I was done, because what was very strange was I was able to keep all the DC continuity in my head since I've been reading it since the early 50s. And I knew all the characters, and I knew all the storylines, and I knew everything like that. Once I finished Crisis and the last issue was published, it all faded. I can't remember a single thing about DC history anymore. So I could never redo Crisis. That was a one-time only affair.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Wow.
Just like doing the acting job, it was there and then it's gone. And I was really happy that everything came together, that the several years that I spent working up that story paid off at the end.
Yeah. Well, you really gave rebirth to it.
I have to give you this last little story. Our first comic shop that opened up in my town. Okay, it was the first time I met other people who were comic fans. And so I remember I walked into the comic shop and I saw some people over by the new issue rack, distraught, grumbling and whining. And I was like, oh man, look at those guys. They're in their 30s. Wow, they're still reading comics. And I turned to the owner and I was like, what's wrong? And then the owner said, Crisis on Infinite Earths just came out. I was like, yeah. And they went, they're destroying those guys' universes. And I was like, they can do that? And I looked over and one guy put the book down on the rack and he looked over at the comic shop owner with the saddest eyes. He goes, it's going away. It's all going away. My world. And I said to myself, I never want to be like that. Those guys are freaks. And I'm twice as bad as them now.
And Marv, this leads us full circle because that series could not have been done without George Perez. You needed him that could do all those characters.
Absolutely. George had not signed on to the book in the beginning. He was going to, we had just done multiple years of Titans, 5-6 years of Titans together, and he was going to go off to do some other project. But we were good friends, so we go out to lunch and everything, or we'd meet up at DC and talk. And he asked me how was my new project coming, and I kept describing it to him as what I was doing on it, not trying to get him to come because he had already had plans of what he wanted to do. But finally, one day, when I told him what part of Crisis I was plotting at that particular moment, he said, I got to draw this. I said, thank you. There was nobody else in my mind who could have done it. There was literally nobody else who could have done it.
Absolutely.
And from the day one, I never thought he was, because that wasn't the plan. But he so wanted to be involved with this. He recognized it as something special that he came in, and it took a lot of burden off of me as well, because I was working with somebody who understood the characters as well as I did. And that made it so easy. The story and everything I had to work out and keep doing it until it was correct, but never once worried about how it was going to all fit together, because George was making it fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to take anything away from Mike Zeck, but when you put Secret Wars and Crisis on Infinite Earth side by side.
John, let me say something about Secret Wars, because I think you're forgetting something important. Secret Wars was designed and was created for Mattel for a line of toys. It was never intended to be a Crisis thing. It was never intended to be a serious book. It was to sell the toys. That was the deal. And I don't think you can't compare the two because they happen to have a lot of characters together. One existed purely to sell toys, and the other was to redo the DC universe and rebuild the DC universe. And I think both were very successful on what they were intended for. But we were not doing the same type of material.
No, I agree, absolutely. But unfortunately, people always, because it came out around the same time, this was always around the comic book store and people talking, but just the level of how Perez was so good for those many characters, it was just incredible. But so, Marv, before we leave, because Mr. Perez passed away not too long ago, can you say something about George that maybe you want people to know about him or something, just in ending here?
I wrote a eulogy type thing that will be in the San Diego Comic-Con magazine. It's not going to be physical printing this time. It's going to be digital. So I don't know how it'll be distributed. But essentially, I said there were two George Perez. One is the brilliant artist who could draw anything you asked him to draw. And he could make every character absolutely perfect. But I didn't want to talk about him because everyone already knows that. I wanted to talk about George Perez, my friend. He was, you read all the things that people have written, how good he was at conventions, how friendly he is to the fans, how he is to, we would get to if we were at a same convention, we get to the convention, they'd open at 9. He would be there an hour early. Why? Because he wanted to draw pictures for the people working on the staff who wouldn't get time to do it during the day. So he got there early. He would do the sketches. He would get up. He would take the photos. He would do all those things. Whatever you heard about George is not only true, it's not even as far as he goes. He was probably one of the best people I've ever known.
Marv, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an honor for you to be here.
Wait a second, that thing came out wrong.
And I can't wait to be on the road with you again.
You take care.
He's cutting in and
I
out.
did it all. Oh boy.
Yes.
You
And
guys
as I said, Marv,
we
for
love,
me,
love
too,
you, Marv.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Say
Thanks
hi
for
to
joining.
Roy next time you speak to him.
Yes. We'll be
take care.
speaking with Roy very soon.
Can't wait to see you at shows.
Take care.
All right,
All right,
everyone
thank you,
have a
Marv.
good
Very
one.
soon. Thank you, Marv.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.